It all started with a single, unremarkable night. You know the kind, where you sit on the couch, half watching some mindless TV show while your wife is buried in her phone, occasionally smirking at something on the screen. That's where I was on a Thursday evening, beer in hand, flipping between the game and some crime drama, not realizing my entire life was already crumbling beneath me. We had been married for 11 years. No kids, just us, and for the most part, it had been a good marriage. Or at least I thought it was. Her name was Emma, and she had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the world when she wanted to. That was her power, making people feel special. But I would soon learn that it wasn't a power she reserved just for me. Lately, she had been distant, not in the obvious dramatic way that movies portray. No sudden fights, no emotional outbursts. Just little things. The way she turned her phone away when I walked into the room. The way she started laughing at texts, but never sharing what was funny anymore. The way she smelled different, as if she'd started wearing perfume just for errands. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband. You hear those stories, guys going through their wives' phones, demanding explanations, losing sleep over small changes. I told myself I wasn't that guy. But at the same time, something inside me had already started to whisper, something is wrong. And then it happened. That night, as she got up to go to bed, she left her phone on the couch. Normally, she took it with her everywhere. Everywhere. But this time, she was either too tired or too distracted. I don't know what compelled me to do it. Maybe it was the nagging feeling that had been sitting in my gut for weeks. Maybe it was the way she had been acting just a little too happy for no apparent reason. Maybe I was just tired of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. So, I picked up her phone, and that's when my world changed. The screen was still lit when I picked up her phone, the lock screen filled with unread notifications. The name at the top of most of them was just D, a simple initial, nothing dramatic, but it stood out immediately because I had never heard her mention anyone by that name. My stomach tightened as I tapped the screen, and for a brief second, I considered putting it down and pretending I had never seen anything. But I didn't. I swiped up, and to my surprise, there was no password. Either she had forgotten to lock it, or she was too comfortable in her deception to think I'd ever check. That small detail burned more than it should have, like I was already invisible in my own home. I opened the messages, and what I saw made my hands tremble. At first, it was nothing explicit, nothing that would make an outsider instantly scream cheating. Just casual conversations, a lot of late-night texting, inside jokes I didn't understand, references to moments I wasn't a part of. But as I scrolled further up, the tone changed. There were pictures, selfies of her, some innocent, some less so, all taken in places I recognized. Our living room, our bedroom. The worst part was that she wasn't just sending him pictures of herself. She was sending him pictures of our life, our home, like he had some claim to it. There were messages where she talked about me, and that's what hurt the most. He's asleep, so I can finally breathe. He doesn't even notice when I leave the room anymore. It's like I'm single. God, I hate pretending everything is fine. Each word was another knife, twisting deeper. I'd spent the last few months trying to figure out what was wrong, trying to fix whatever distance had crept between us, and all along, she had already checked out. She wasn't waiting for things to get better. She was waiting for me to be too blind to see it happening. Then came the messages that shattered any last shred of doubt I had left. I can't wait to see you again. Yesterday was amazing. I still feel you on me. I wish I could stay the night. If only he knew how easy it is to lie to him. The room around me blurred, my heartbeat hammering in my ears as I tried to process what I was looking at. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just an emotional connection. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She was cheating, and she had been doing it for a while. I kept scrolling, searching for an answer that would make it hurt less, but there was none. There was only more. More evidence that my wife wasn't mine anymore, if she had ever been at all. I heard her footsteps in the hallway before I saw her. I should have put the phone down, should have acted like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't. My grip tightened around it as she walked into the living room, already half asleep, rubbing her eyes. "Hey," she mumbled, her voice thick with drowsiness. "Why are you still up?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, at the woman I had shared a life with, and wondered how much of it had been a lie. She blinked at me, Confused at first, then her eyes dropped to her phone, still unlocked in my hand. And then I saw it. The moment she realized she was caught. It was just a flicker, a quick shift from confusion to fear before she forced her expression into something else, something practiced. She was already preparing an excuse, already figuring out how to talk her way out of it. "Give me my phone," she said, her voice calmer than it had any right to be. I didn't move. "Who is D?" She scoffed, like I was being ridiculous, like I was the one who had done something wrong. "You're seriously looking through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy, you know." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Privacy? You're talking about privacy when you've been sneaking around behind my back." Her expression hardened. "I don't know what you think you saw, but don't." I cut her off before she could start. "Don't insult me with some half-assed excuse. I read everything, Emma. Everything." She shifted on her feet, crossing her arms over her chest like she could physically block out the truth. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it," I challenged, holding up the phone. "Explain the messages. Explain the pictures. Explain why you're talking about me like I'm some idiot who doesn't see what's happening right in front of him." She hesitated, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find the right lie, the one that would make this all go away. But I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't going to let her twist this into something it wasn't. "How long?" I demanded. Her gaze flickered away, her body tensing. "Emma," I pressed, my voice sharp. "How long have you been fucking him?" She flinched, and for a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. But then, she did what she always did when she didn't want to deal with something. She turned it back on me. "If you weren't so distant all the time, maybe I wouldn't have needed someone else," she shot back, her voice laced with venom. That was it, the final nail in the coffin. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. She was blaming me, like I had somehow forced her into another man's bed. I stood up so fast the beer bottle on the table tipped over, spilling onto the floor. "You seriously think this is my fault?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "Maybe if you actually paid attention to me instead of your stupid routines, you would have noticed something was wrong. But you didn't, did you? You just kept going through the motions, acting like everything was fine while I was screaming for something more." I stared at her, barely recognizing the woman in front of me. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with was gone. Or maybe she had never been there to begin with. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "Who is he?" She smirked. Smirked. Why does it matter? Something inside me snapped, but not in the way I expected. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel betrayal. I just felt done. I exhaled slowly, setting her phone down on the table. "You know what? You're right. It doesn't matter." For the first time in my life, I saw her falter. She had expected a fight, had prepared for it, had probably rehearsed a dozen different arguments in her head. But she wasn't prepared for indifference. I turned away, walking toward the bedroom. Not because I forgave her, not because I was going to pretend this hadn't happened, but because I needed a second to breathe before I decided what I was going to do next. And I knew, without a doubt, that whatever came next, it wouldn't include her. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the house I had worked so hard to build, wondering how many nights she had come home after being with him, slipping under these same sheets, acting like nothing had happened. Every now and then, I would hear her moving around in the living room, pacing, probably waiting for me to come back out and start screaming at her. She wanted a fight, something she could latch onto, some reason to justify what she had done. I wasn't going to give her that. Around 4 a.m, I finally got up. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a coffee, and sat at the table like it was any other day. Emma was already awake, curled up on the couch with her arms wrapped around her knees. The second she saw me, she straightened up, her eyes searching mine, looking for any sign of what I was thinking. I didn't give her one. I just sipped my coffee, watching her. "You're not even going to talk to me?" she finally asked, her voice hoarse, probably from spending the night working herself into a panic. I set the mug down and looked at her. "What is there to talk about?" She scoffed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "Don't do that. Don't sit there and act like this is nothing." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my nose. "What do you want me to say, Emma? That I'm shocked? That I didn't see this coming?" That I thought we were happy? Because we both know that's bullshit. You knew exactly what you were doing, and you didn't care. And now that I've finally caught on, you're looking for a way to make this my fault. Her jaw clenched. I never said it was your fault. I tilted my head. Didn't you, though? Last night, you were real quick to say I was distant, that I didn't pay attention, that you were screaming for something more. Sounds a lot like blame to me. She rubbed her hands over her face. Jesus, Steve, do you even want to fix this? I almost laughed. Fix this? You fucked another man, Emma. Multiple times from the looks of it. Lied to my face. Made a fool out of me. And you think this is something we can just fix? Her eyes flashed with something. Anger, frustration, maybe even regret, but I wasn't in the mood to decipher it. She stood up, pacing across the room like a caged animal. People make mistakes, she said, her voice tight. I nodded slowly. Yeah, they do. But a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is missing an anniversary because you lost track of time. A mistake isn't months of sneaking around behind your husband's back, lying every single day, sending messages about how much you love fucking someone else. That's not a mistake, Emma. That's a choice. She stopped pacing and turned to face me. You think I don't feel guilty? You think I don't hate myself for this? I scoffed, shaking my head. No, I don't think you do. I think you hate that you got caught. I think you hate that I know now. But if you actually felt guilty, if you actually hated what you were doing, you have stopped. You didn't. Her breathing was uneven now, like she was struggling to keep her emotions in check. I don't love him, she said, as if that was supposed to mean something. Congratulations, I said flatly. That doesn't change anything. She took a step closer. I love you. I stood up, pushing the chair back with a scrape against the floor. No, you don't. Her eyes widened slightly, like she wasn't expecting me to say that. Yes, I do. I never stop. I shook my head. Love isn't just words, Emma. Love is actions. Love is respect. Love is choosing the person you promise to be faithful to every single day, even when things aren't perfect. What you did wasn't love. It was selfish. It was cowardly. And now that you see it's blowing up in your face, you're trying to backpedal, but it's too late. She crossed her arms, her lips pressing into a thin line. So that's it? You're just done? I studied her for a long moment. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the same person I had married. Maybe she never had been, or maybe she had just changed into someone I no longer recognized. Either way, the answer was obvious. Yeah, I said finally. I'm done. Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. Whatever part of me had once cared about her pain was gone, burned away by every single message I had read, every lie she had told, every moment I'd spent feeling like an idiot while she laughed behind my back. She swallowed hard. We can go to counseling. We can figure this out. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I don't need a counselor to tell me what I already know. I deserve better than this. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wondering if the person I'm supposed to trust is lying to me. That's not a marriage, Emma. That's a joke. She wiped at her eyes angrily. So that's it? 11 years, and you're just walking away. I narrow my eyes. You walked away first. For the first time, she didn't have anything to say. She just stood there, looking at me like she was trying to figure out how this had happened, like she hadn't been the one who had set it all in motion. I walked past her without another word, heading for the bedroom. I could feel her watching me, but I didn't look back. I wasn't going to let her see even a flicker of hesitation, because there wasn't any. I pulled out a suitcase, started throwing clothes into it. I didn't care where I was going, didn't care what happened next. All I knew was that I wasn't staying here. And if she thought this was over, she had no idea what was coming next. Packing my bag felt almost surreal. Every shirt, every pair of jeans, every stupid little thing I threw into that suitcase felt like another reminder of how much of my life I had wasted on her. I could hear Emma moving around outside the bedroom, probably trying to decide if she should come in and try again, but she must have known there was nothing left to say. I wasn't interested in hearing more excuses, more fake apologies, or some half-assed attempt to salvage a marriage she had already thrown in the trash. I zipped up the suitcase, grabbed my phone, and walked out. She was sitting on the couch, eyes red, but I didn't care. Maybe a part of me had been waiting to feel something, some final wave of sadness, some hesitation, but it never came. She looked up at me, opening her mouth like she was about to say something, but I beat her to it. "I'll be staying somewhere else for a while," I said, my voice even. "Don't contact me unless it's important." She stood up quickly. "Steve, please just talk to me." I shook my head. "We already talked. You just didn't like what I had to say." She reached out, but I stepped back. "Just stop, Emma. You don't get to cheat on me and then act like you're the victim. You made this choice. You live with it." Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "So that's it? You're just leaving?" I stared at her for a long moment. "No, Emma. I'm just getting started." I walked out without another word, leaving her standing there in the house that no longer felt like home. I didn't know where I was going, didn't have a plan yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't about to let her walk away from this unscathed. I drove for hours, my mind racing through every possible way to handle this. Divorce was inevitable, but I wanted more than that. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. I wanted her to know what it was like to have your entire world shattered by the one person you trusted most. That was when I remembered something important. Emma had more to lose than just me. She worked for a small company, one that prided itself on professionalism and integrity. It wasn't some massive corporation where people could get away with affairs and scandals. No, her company had strict policies about workplace relationships, especially ones that crossed the line into personal misconduct. If the guy she had been cheating with worked with her, I had an opening, and I was willing to bet that he did. I pulled over into a parking lot and started digging. I went through her messages again, this time looking for any details about him, any references to where they met up, where he worked. It didn't take long. She had been reckless, careless, too caught up in her little fantasy to cover her tracks properly. His name was Derek. He worked in her department, and based on a few of the messages, I could already tell he was in a relationship of his own. That was all I needed. I found his girlfriend on social media. It took some scrolling, but there she was, his long-term partner, completely unaware that the man she trusted was sneaking around with my wife. I sent her a message, kept it short and simple. "Hey, I don't know you, but I think you should see this." Then I attached screenshots. Every message, every picture, every disgusting little detail. It took less than 10 minutes for her to respond. "Who the hell are you?" "The husband of the woman your boyfriend has been sleeping with." She didn't respond for a while, probably reading through everything, trying to make sense of it. When she finally did, it was exactly what I expected. "I'm going to kill him. You're not alone." While she handled Derek, I focused on the next step, Emma's job. I found her company's HR email and drafted another message, attaching the same screenshots, this time highlighting the fact that she was having an inappropriate workplace relationship. I wasn't sure what their policy was, but I was willing to bet it wasn't something they would ignore. I hit send. It felt good, not just because I was getting back at her, but because I was taking control. She had spent months making a fool out of me, treating me like I was nothing, like I didn't matter. Well, now she was about to see just how much I did. By the time I checked into a motel for the night, my phone was already blowing up. Missed calls from Emma. Messages asking what I had done. But I ignored them. I let her sit in her own panic, let her wonder just how much damage I had caused. And the best part? This was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Emma had been calling since 6 in the morning, and I had ignored every single one. But I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. She wasn't the type to let something go until she had the last word. I let the phone ring one more time before finally answering. "You finally decided to pick up?" she snapped, her voice filled with barely contained rage. I rubbed my temple, already exhausted by the conversation I knew was coming. "What do you want, Emma?" Her breathing was unsteady, like she had been crying. "You know exactly what I want, Steve. What the hell did you do?" I let out a slow breath, staying calm. "I made sure the people in your life knew exactly who you are. That's all." There was silence on the other end, but I could hear her shifting around, probably pacing, trying to figure out what to say next. "You sent those messages to HR?" she finally asked, her voice lower now, like she was realizing just how deep she had buried herself. "Yep. You're unbelievable," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done to my career?" I clenched my jaw, barely keeping my voice steady. You did that yourself when you decided to sleep with your coworker, Emma. You made your choices. I just made sure you had to deal with the consequences. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking slightly. They suspended me. I might lose my job, Steve. I closed my eyes for a moment, forcing myself to feel nothing. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you started sneaking around. She let out a bitter laugh. You think you're some kind of hero? You think this makes you better than me? I didn't answer right away. I let her sit in her own silence, in her own mess. I don't care what you think, Emma. I really don't. You can hate me, blame me, scream at me. But at the end of the day, none of this would be happening if you had just been honest. If you wanted out of this marriage, you could have told me. Instead, you lied. You betrayed me. And now you're paying for it. She exhaled sharply, her anger shifting into something else, something more desperate. We can fix this, she said, her tone softer now. It doesn't have to be like this, Steve. I messed up. I know I did. But we've been together for so long. We can come back from this. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. No, we can't. She sniffled, her voice shaking. You're really done with me? Yeah, I said, my voice steady. I am. There was nothing left to say. I ended the call, turned off my phone, and sat there in the quiet of the motel room, feeling lighter than I had in months. She wanted to fix things, but only because she had finally lost control. But I wasn't interested in fixing something that had been broken beyond repair. She had made her choice, and now, for the first time in a long time, I was making mine. And I was never looking back. I sat there for a long time after hanging up, staring at the dull motel walls, letting the silence settle in. There was no satisfaction, no victory, just an overwhelming sense of finality. Emma was out of my life, and there was no coming back from this. The part of me that had spent years building a life with her, making compromises, loving her even when things got tough, that part was gone. I thought maybe I'd feel some kind of regret, but I didn't. She had made sure of that the moment she chose someone else over me. By noon, I had checked out of the motel and started looking for a more permanent place to stay. I had no intention of going back to that house, the one filled with memories that now felt more like ghosts. It wasn't home anymore, and I refused to let it be a reminder of what I had lost. My first call was to a lawyer. I wanted the divorce started as soon as possible. No delays, no second chances. I made it clear that I wanted everything to be handled quickly, efficiently, with as little communication with Emma as possible. The second call was to a moving company. I wasn't going to drag this out, wasn't going to leave my things there for her to go through, to touch, to try and use against me. I gave them a list of what I wanted, my clothes, my personal items, the things that actually mattered to me. Everything else could stay. The furniture, the dishes, the stupid decorations she picked out to make the place look modern. None of it meant anything to me now. If she wanted it, she could have it. I spent the next few days handling everything that needed to be done. The lawyer worked fast, drawing up the papers, and by the end of the week, Emma had been served. The texts and calls started immediately, the same cycle over and over again. Anger, denial, bargaining. At first, she was furious, saying I was being petty, that I was throwing away everything over one mistake. Then she tried to shift the blame again, saying if I had been a better husband, if I had been more present, if I had just listened to her needs, maybe she wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. That was the moment I blocked her number. I had already wasted too much time listening to her justifications. I wasn't going to give her another second of my life. The only time I saw her again was at the lawyer's office. She looked different, tired, drained, like she hadn't been sleeping. Maybe she expected me to feel bad for her, to offer some kind of comfort, but I felt nothing. She signed the papers without much of a fight, probably realizing she had no ground to stand on. The house went to her, which was fine by me. The only thing I cared about was getting out clean. As I walked out of the office, she called out to me one last time. "Steve," she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Was there ever a chance that maybe we could have worked through this?" I turned to her, really looking at her for the first time in weeks. "No," I said simply. "Not after what you did." She nodded, like she had expected it, but it still held onto some small, pathetic hope. I didn't give her anything else. I walked away, and this time, I knew I wouldn't be looking back. The first night in my new apartment was the best sleep I had in months. No tension, no wondering if she was lying to me, no second-guessing every little detail. Just peace. I didn't know exactly what my future looked like yet, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine to decide. I wasn't the man she had betrayed anymore. I wasn't the fool who had trusted someone who didn't deserve it. I was free, and that was enough.